Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel Ray and today is another very special Theory Tuesday with Mr. Ray. Say hello, Mr. Ray.
Hi everybody, how's it going?
Today we are working on The Ghost Maker by Moon Shop. And if I can make this work properly, I would show. Where's the button? We're in the dark. We're in the dark. No, actually, this shows off the crystals really well in the dark. Look at that. Oh my gosh. So pretty. So, decided to do this episode a little bit in the dark for us today, as we are working on a very dark section, and I should be done with this, or very close to done with this, by the time that we film our next Theory Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
You excited?
Not this one, but the next one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, without further ado, the idea of this video is that I diamond paint, which is what I'm doing right here. I diamond paint while my husband tells me weird and wacky stories. Right now we're doing Skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
We're doing the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, yeah.
He's analyzing it and then getting my reaction. So, to those of you who are like, she's not reacting, I'm listening. I'm taking it in, and then I'm processing it in real time. So, please join us and enjoy the laughs. I have a very funny husband.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
And I'm sharing him with you.
Funny
today.
In the kind of way that we're laughing together. Like you're not laughing at me, right?
No, no, I'm not. No. Anyway, let's go.
So we're doing Skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
Riveting stuff.
Yeah, and do you remember the last time you said that there was just two, and one of the notes was there's too many names, so we had to steer clear of the names?
Yep.
Well, he starts into the next section of the book, and they're at a dinner.
It's all names, isn't it?
Oh my God! Just after they've signed the deal for 10 million,
Yeah.
to do a year's worth of research on all kinds of stuff, UFOs, psychic phenomenon to do with UFOs, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
And he starts dropping names left, right, and center. He even drops the name of this within the first paragraph of this Brazilian general. And I googled that Brazilian general. I read up on him. All of the names he drops are just...
How many rabbit holes would you say you got into this time?
Not as many as last time, because this does go down the kind of meat and potato route,
Okay.
And then I read it the same as I have for the last one. I read it and I highlighted bits and then wrote notes on what it was about and all this, And then that was about a week ago, and then I left it open and I never saved it, and I must have closed it and not saved it because I have none of the notes. But it should be fine.
And now we have a notes list, James.
Yeah. So but look, I can do this, no problem. It'll be fine.
Please, if you haven't watched any of the previous videos, please go and watch those first.
But I don't think you'll be lost.
But you might not be lost.
I don't think you will, no.
But
so we're not going to talk about...
You're supposed to convince them to help me watch.
Oh, sorry. You should go back and watch them.
What are the other things that you do on YouTube?
Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. And what else do you do?
I don't know. Just, act natural.
I'm not, okay, act natural. Just be cool.
Just be cool.
Just be cool.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm really not cut out for this. So, but basically what it is they have a big dinner, and it's all the guys from SAP and
SAP.
Yeah, and from the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and all these guys, and they're all around. And then he even mentions more names because he says that Lakatsky, who's one of the writers of this book, he says that he rocks up and he brings all of these subject matter experts, which is another acronym, SME.
What?
Yeah.
Another acronym,
SME. Oh. So he shows up with all these SMEs, and then he names a few of the SMEs and their area of speciality and stuff like that, but we're not going to go into that. And they're all sitting around and they're having a big dinner,
Yeah.
And He mentions as well at it that do you remember Jonathan Axelrod?
Jonathan Axelrod.
Yeah, do you remember he was the guy?
Is that his real name? That's how...
No, it's actually not his real name.
Because it sounds like a corn name.
Because he only mentions in this that it's not his real name. Because he's still active duty military intelligence or whatever. That's what they're saying.
Jonathan Axelrod.
But he mentions, and do you remember I said like that one of the main things about this is that they're always throwing shade at the new guys on the block, the tip guys.
Yeah.
So he goes, oh, Jonathan Axelrod was there, and of course, in the previous thing, I hadn't mentioned this, but in the previous thing, when he was interviewing people to join the ASAP group, he interviewed one guy that was a former Navy guy, right? Mm-hmm. And he told him about the Nimitz encounter with the Tic Tac UFOs, and then Axelrod ends up investigating the Tic Tac UFOs. And you know who else is at this dinner? Lou Elizondo.
Really? Yeah,
and it said like that Axelrod showed up with Lou Elizondo, and that the implication here, of course, is that SAP was on the cutting edge, and they had investigated all of this stuff, and their guys had brought all of this stuff, and now Lou is just riding on their coattails, if you will.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So he tells a story about how Lou Elizondo is, that he met him, and it was the only time he met him, and he was really entertaining. And he told stories about how he had extrasensory perception and psychic powers, and they had come in handy when he was in war zones in Afghanistan, etc. You know, and that it had helped him have premonitions about when his unit was in danger. Now, I'd imagine if you were in Afghanistan and you're an American military personnel, you're probably in danger most of the time. Do you know?
Yeah.
And I'm not a psychic, but he says that anyway. And then this is where it gets interesting. Then he mentions another person from the Defense Intelligence Agency, one Juliet Witt.
Okay.
Now, I think this is interesting because in all of the books, you know, in the first book and in the whole of this book, and this book mentions, I mean, there was a dozen people that I had on that conspiracy theory chart, or famous people in UFOs chart.
Yeah.
But
which is linked in the description if you're confused about the names.
Which is in part one, yeah.
Part one or part two? Part two.
In part two of this, sorry. Yeah, so I mention her because she's the only woman in all of these books.
Period.
Yeah, that wasn't the wife of a rancher or someone that was just staying on the property to look after it with someone else.
Huh.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she's the only person that's like a professional thing. She's an analyst with the Defense Intelligence Agency, yeah?
Yeah.
So he says at the end of it, near the middle of this chapter, that they realized that Lou Elizondo and her were the only people that hadn't been at the ranch.
Mm-hmm.
So they extended an invitation to come and visit the ranch.
Why don't you come on over and see all the
the spooky stuff. And she's the only one that took them up on it. And they never mention why Lou didn't.
And they never heard from her.
They never heard, but they never heard from. But I think the implication here is that that Lou was too scared. You know, he didn't want to.
Too chicken.
He was too chicken to brush with the Skinwalker Ranch.
Mm.
So that's it. And basically from that point on, we're off to the races, and it's your bread and butter spooky stuff. So
I have to move over to a bigger tray because this is all the same color.
Yeah. So now it turns into bread and butter spooky stuff. Are you ready?
Am I ready for the spook?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
Let's go.
So
spooky time.
It's sometime. Let's say it's a while later. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Juliet Witt comes. Do I even have her? God, not having my notes is terrible. My notes were so good.
I'm sure they were, babe. I'm sure they were.
Yeah, her name is definitely Juliet Witt. So Juliet Witt anyway comes to visit the ranch. Yeah.
Yeah.
She flies out to the ranch. She brings all kinds of equipment. She brings cameras, infrared cameras, regular cameras. She's got night vision goggles, the whole shebang, right?
Mm-hmm.
She comes out, she arrives early in the morning, and he says, like, she is no nonsense, you know?
Yeah.
So she gets off the plane at Vernal, she gets into the rental car, she drives straight to the property. They have a quick breakfast while they're standing around. He kind of makes a point to say that, like, she's got all her equipment. She's, like, double checks everything while they're standing around eating, standing up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And she's right, this property is 520 acres. I want to walk around the perimeter. I want to go to all the hot spots. I want to take all the photos, and I need to get out of here by tomorrow morning, you know?
She is a busy
She
woman.
is business. So that's himself, Bigelow, who owns the ranch, of course, at that time, and Colin Kelleher, who's one of the writers of this book. Yeah,
right.
So they start out on their mission sometime in the early morning, about 10 or 11 a.m. Yeah, and they start walking along the kind of perimeter of the property, and he's pointing out stuff. Oh, look, that's where we saw the rift in time and space that the Bigfoot fell out of. Oh, this is where those blue orbs chased the cattle off the ranch. This over here, this is where there was a hole in the fabric of reality where we could see into another dimension. This place used to be a great coffee shop, but it closed down recently. You just don't get the people around here anymore. They used to do these lovely coffees. Oh, it's terrible. So they're walking along the perimeter of the thing, and like I said, he's pointing out all these spooky things to her, yeah?
Yeah.
And then they come across one of the corners of the property, and just over the fence line, there's this kind of spooky tableau, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like a vignette kind of thing, where, like, there's basically dead horses lying around, there's posts, and they've got cows' skulls put on them, there's, like, desiccated, there's just loads of animals, and they seem to have been arranged in some kind of way, you know?
Ew.
Yeah, and they're looking at it, and they're, like, wondering, what is actually going on here? This is...
Well, I mean, it's protection.
It's weird, but
we are in America, right?
Yeah, this is in America. It's in the Uinta Valley in Utah.
I mean, I wouldn't want to see a bunch of bones gathered in a place, but I know that there are places like that.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't seem that weird either. And, like, he's got...
Sorry, am I ruining it?
No, not at all. Because, like, there's another thing as well where, like, he's... Like, there's not many photographs in the book, but there's one photograph, and it's like a spinal column with ribs, and it's in this page, and it goes, some of the bodies, that found on the ranch, could it be something, could it be an indication of something spooky going on? It's like, what, in the high desert in Utah? Are you joking me? Like on an ill-maintained cattle ranch?
I mean...
So anyway, that's the crack anyway, and they're walking around, and they like I said, they spend that's sometime in the early afternoon, and they spend the better half of the day just walking around, yeah?
Right.
And then eventually they get back to the property. Do you know the original property? Like, they go past the property number 2, as they call it, house number 2 or whatever, where a lot of the spooky stuff happened. Like, that is where they saw the Bigfoot come out of the hole in the sky, and etc. etc. And then they get back to the original property, and so there's a big yard, and there's a pasture, and then at the bottom there's kind of like a line of these things called cottonwood trees, which are a type of willow tree, apparently. I looked it up.
Yep.
And at this time it's starting to get to the evening, so they have some sandwiches out in the yard, and then they get sandwiches. Then they get 2 chairs. They get 2 like folding chairs,
yeah,
and they sit back to back, and they're there with like infrared cameras and
all the equipment,
all the equipment, and they're just, and he said like that for the first minute or two, like, she'd ask a question or two, hey, you ever see any of this? Yeah, we've seen some of those orbs. We've seen a lot of them. You remember I told you about the orbs chasing the cattle, etc. And he said then eventually they just quietened down, and the 2 of them are just sitting there in silence for a while, and they're just looking around, And then next thing you know, they hear this kind of noise just off to the left, and he looks over, and trundling out of the darkness towards him is this
Bigfoot.
No, it's like about the size of a calf, like a large calf, but a small cow maybe. It's about the size of a
Okay.
It's about the size of a Dexter. Which is the type of Kerry
It's
cow.
not quite. It's not quite as big as a.
It's about the size of a Kerry Blue, which is a small cow. No, it's about the size of a large calf or whatever, you know. But it's a beaver. So it's a beaver.
Oh, it's a beaver. Oh,
it's got
the
a
thing
flat,
is a beaver.
Yeah, it's got a flat tail like a beaver.
Yeah.
And along its backs, it's got those spikes, like you know those dinosaurs with the spikes on them.
Oh yeah, like a steg. No.
Like I think it
uh,
might be a Stegosaurus. Yeah, they have the spikes going down the back like.
I think
plates.
there actually is a Spinosaurus.
Well, it's like that. It's basically like it's got short legs, a kind of rotund body, you know, a kind of a rodent-like face like a beaver with a flat. It's basically a giant beaver with Stegosaurus plates going down its back and short little powerful legs, and it's just padding along nice and calmly. And it passes about 30 feet, you know, just comes around them in a circle, passes about 30 feet, and then it goes around a shed at the corner of the property. And the two of them are looking at each other. The two of them turn around and they're like, "What the?" And they run after and they run around the side of the property.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone.
Of course.
Yeah, no footprints or anything.
What?
Yeah, it's just gone.
Well, I guess it's dry. So.
They also didn't take any photographs.
Of course not.
Even though they had all of that equipment and everything like that.
Even though they were ready for
literally
anything.
Genuinely, so then she goes so they run around she can't she's obviously very professional and stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So she's up and down methodically trying to find where it came from, where did it go, you know. She's going around and she can't see anything, right? And they go back to this kind of double wide trailer that they've got that they call the command post, you know?
HQ.
Yeah, back to the HQ. And she writes out some quick notes and then she's kicking herself that she didn't take any photographs. You know?
How would you do it?
All that
Who
equipment.
sits around without
training.
their phone in their hand? You know what I mean?
But I think this is 2006. There weren't really smartphones like we have, but there were definitely phones that could take photos and stuff. But she had all the equipment, she had infrared stuff, she had all this anyway, but they never took a photo. Then she writes down some quick notes and then she's like, okay, I'm gonna get some sleep and I'm gonna have to head off in the morning. And she was shook, you know, after the whole experience.
Yeah.
So then she she goes into the room and she leaves the door open and she insists on the light being left on in the kitchen. She's freaked out, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the story. She gets up in the morning and she goes back to her home in Virginia, right? And I mean, that's the end of it, isn't it? No, it's not the end of it. About a week later, she hears this screaming, yeah?
Is it the Stegosaurus beaver?
No, it's her roommate, and the roommate is going crazy.
Oh.
And she runs out and the roommate's like, ah! Goes into the room and, are you alright, Steve? And he's like, no. He goes I saw this dark figure. I woke up and there was this dark figure standing in the corner of the room and it started to walk towards me and I turned on the lights and it's gone, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've heard this story before. And then over the course of about a month, these kind of things keep happening.
Ooh.
Yeah, she wakes up one night and the same story, there's this dark figure in the room with her.
Mm.
And she sits up bolt upright and it starts walking slowly towards her and she turns on the light and it's gone, you know?
Is that why you keep waking up in the middle of the night?
I think so, yeah. Skinwalkers.
You're getting too close, dude.
That happens. Then they start seeing the classic blue balls. First, do you know what the blue orbs? Let's call them orbs. Let's call them blue orbs. Let's call them blue orbs. Are you into science here or what, Rachel? She starts seeing the classic blue orbs, right?
Uh-huh.
First of all, it's out of the corner of her eyes. You know, she's walking past a doorway and she can see them in the room and she looks in and they're gone.
I can't see.
She's turning the corner in the hallway and she can see one shoot down behind her out of the corner of her eyes. Then she starts seeing them more overtly. Like they'll float across the living room and out the window, you know, and stuff like this.
Officer.
She starts seeing all of these things. The viewings, her roommate keeps having the experience where he's waking up and there's a dark figure in the room, and when he turns the light on, he takes to sleeping with the light on, and then the blue orbs start showing up in the room. You know, it's like if he's not paying attention to this thing, these blue orbs are going around. You know.
Yeah.
Then one day, about 2 or 3 months afterwards, she gets into the car to go to work. Yeah, and she's backing out of the garage.
Garage.
There you go. Yeah, she's backing out of the garage, and she's backing out, and suddenly there's this huge like owl comes down and just the back window, like whets at the back window, and she's like, "What is that?" She backs out more, and it starts coming down and just swooping down on the front of the car. Like, it's the biggest owl she's ever seen. She's never seen an owl like this. Like, of course, we've talked before about owls and screen memories and aliens and all that sort of thing, you know?
Yeah.
So she has this experience with this massive owl, you know, where it's attacking her in the morning, you know?
Yeah.
Then the roommate and her are chilling out one Friday night, and they're just sitting at home, yeah, and they're watching a movie, and suddenly 2 bottles of wine that were in a wine rack just jump off the wine rack and fly across the room and smash on the floor. More blue orbs. The roommate eventually moves out because he keeps seeing this dark figure in his room when the lights are out, and when the lights are on, he's got these blue orbs annoying him. And that's basically where, like, your man, she didn't even report this. She didn't want to say anything about it because, you know, she's tough. You know what I mean?
Right. Not that.
Yeah, I mean, blue orbs and dark figures in her room are a little bit annoying, but, you know, whatever. It's actually our friend Jonathan Axelrod that reports this to the Bass guys. This gets serious now in a minute. The next...
I was just going to say, I wonder if Amber Heard could have used that as an excuse.
Oh, come on. The next story now is, then he goes into the next chapter. He goes into a story, and it's based in Ventura County, California. And do you remember in the first book?
Where are my Venturians at?
Do you remember in the first book, they just suddenly out of nowhere they're like, oh, and then there's this other really weird ranch in California, and they do a whole chapter about the weird ranch in California? You remember?
Not really, but go on.
Anyway, this is basically the detailed version of what happened at this ranch in California, you know?
Okay.
So there's this family, the Scarsdales, you know? And there's Buck Scarsdale. Buck, yeah. And his son, Bo.
Buck and Bo.
And they've got a small ranch there, you know?
Is this names being protected, or is this real?
Oh, I don't think these are real names, like. Okay. But just wait till you hear the next name that comes up here. Well, then there's Joanna, who's Buck's girlfriend, yeah?
Yeah.
And they live on a 20-acre kind of farm. They've got an orchard, and they keep horses and stuff. And he's former law enforcement. Whenever anyone has military or law enforcement things, they mention that, because I think that they think it gives it more credibility.
American Psyche.
I think that that's what's going on, because they're at pains every time. So anyway, they're all chilling out. It's the 5th of July, the day after the 4th of July. Yeah. Okay. They're all chilling out on the front porch of the house. Yeah. And they're just chilling out and chatting. It's about 9 p.m. And Buck goes into the kitchen to get more coffee, and he looks out the window of the kitchen, and there's an orchard at the back of the house, maybe about a quarter mile away from the house, you know? Okay. And he sees these lights in the orchard, like these kind of bluey white lights, and they appear to be a couple of feet off the ground.
Blue balls.
They appear
massive. Blue balls.
Oh my goodness! A bit of decorum, please, please. A bit of decorum. For me doing all this research.
You're the one saying it.
And so they run out. because we're about to start talking about those now here in a minute. They run out, right? They see 7 of them and they're in the orchard, okay?
Okay.
He runs out in the yard and he's like, Bo, who I gather from reading this is probably about 14 or 15, you know?
Okay.
And he's like, Bo, Joanna, there's these real lights in the orchard or something. So they run down off the porch and they're standing there, you know, looking around the side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And they can see the lights in the orchard. And he's like, this is weird. Is someone actually trying to steal from my orchard? Like, who does that, you know?
Right.
But it looks like they've got big machinery in here because the lights are a couple of feet off the ground, you know? And they're casting shadows and stuff like that. Strong lights, like, yeah?
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, let's get some stuff. So they get some flashlights and they jump in the truck, yeah? And they shoot down to the orchard, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
On the way, they check the front gate, and the front gate is locked. Then they drive into the orchard, and as they're driving in there, the lights disappear. Just boop, gone. And it says in the book that they couldn't quite remember them gone, but just that suddenly they were gone, you know?
Right.
And nobody remembers seeing them shut off or anything. It's just, they're gone. They get down to the orchard, and they start looking around, yeah?
Yeah.
They're over here with the flashlights. They're over there. They can't see any tracks on the floor or anything. And then suddenly from behind a bush, this kind of clicking noise. You know? And they said it wasn't quite organic, but it wasn't not organic. And it wasn't mechanical, but it wasn't not mechanical. Just this weird clicking noise. Yeah?
Okay.
So the clicking noise from behind the bush. They shine the lights on the bush and they start moving towards it. Click, click. From behind them. Oh my God. And they turn around. More clicking noises. Every time they hear a clicking noise and they start to go to investigate that area, the clicking noise is behind them. And they're just whirling around. And after about 4 or 5 times that this happens, they start to get really freaked out, you know?
Yeah.
Because there's clearly nothing there. They turn around to where they hear it and it's just empty space. Or it's a bush. And it's not a big enough bush to hide anything, you know? And they spread out and they're looking and
It's a small bush.
they're like, okay, there's nothing here. We've been in here for about 20 minutes. Let's just go and make sure that the back of the property is secure. And that these guys in there, whatever it was, you know, their trailers that were stealing our fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So they go around the back of the properties and the gate is all chained up and everything with a padlock and a chain on it and everything.
Okay.
So
it's all locked up.
So it's all locked up and they are shook because like there were 7 of these big lights. There's no sign of any machinery. There's the weird clicking. This is weird as, you know?
Yeah.
They get into the car and they start to drive back and it's getting for 10 p.m. now, you know?
Yeah.
And then Buck's phone rings, yeah?
Yeah.
And it's Buck's brother, Roger. So Buck is talking to Roger and Roger says, Buck, I'm on my way home from a social event. I'll be passing by your place. I mean, if it's not too late, I'll call in for a bit. And Buck is like, thank God you phoned because we're having a really weird experience here. Oh, come on in, man. And so Roger comes on in. And Roger and Buck are chatting. And he says that Roger is the most educated, he's the most educated member of the family, you know? Okay. He's got jurisprudence, he's a lawyer, he's got a doctorate, you know? And he's a very logical guy and he doesn't jump to conclusions or whatever. So they explain to him what's happened. And he's like, that is really weird. He goes like, that's hard to explain. Is it crickets or something? And they're like, no, I know what a cricket sounds like. And it's nighttime, you know? Mm-hmm. This was like a loud, not mechanical, not organic clicking noise, like, you know, and the lights and everything. And they're like, okay, well, let's go down there and check it out. Okay. So Buck and Rogers gets in the car. Seriously, Buck and Roger. Like, if you're going to give people assumed names. So they... when I read it, I was just like, this is insane. Buck Rogers in the world of tomorrow, like. But anyway, they get in the car and they get in the truck, I guess, and they drive down to the orchard, yeah?
Yeah.
And they're going around, and he's like, yeah, it was over here, Roger. This is where we heard the clicking, and then another one behind us, and another one behind us. And then they hear another clicking. And they turn around to look at it. And while they're turning around, Roger sees something flash in his peripheral vision. And he turns around just in time to see a giant metallic thing disappear into a rift, a kind of hole in space and time, about 12 feet off the ground. And it's left a kind of a blue swirling kind of burning thing in his retina. And at that stage, this very logical Roger has freaked out.
Yeah.
He's like, this cannot happen. This is not real. So they go back to the house, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And Roger's pretty shook. And he goes away. And they report it to MUFON. And who are like a ages old like UFO civilian UFO thing, you know?
Okay.
Like they're going for decades. But MUFON goes and tells OSAP. And OSAP are like, this sounds exactly like what we're interested in, and that's how they get involved, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So the OSAP boys arrive down, yeah?
Yep.
They arrive down, and they're down here. They're three former law enforcement guys as well. Oops. So these three former law enforcement guys come down and they start interviewing the family, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And they set up loads of stuff. They've got night vision goggles. They set up cameras everywhere, you know? And they're down there for 3 or 4 days. And they don't really see anything, yeah?
Right.
Except one night, the night before they left, they're out there walking around with the night vision goggles on. And they can see these orbs, you know?
Were they blue?
They were under night vision, so they're actually just kind of greeny blobs on a dark green background, you know?
Okay.
And they can see them, and they're moving in kind of, what would you say, in sequence and stuff.
Okay.
You know, forming patterns, splitting apart, coming back together and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in the pasture that's beside the orchard. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of where the family have reported seeing most of the stuff. You know? After the lights in the orchard and before the OSAP guys show up, occasionally they see these blue orbs out in the field. You know?
Yeah.
So they can see them through the night vision, but when they take the night vision off, they can't see anything, and they can't film anything, and they don't get any photos.
Of course.
So they write it up, and they go away after about 3 days. Yeah?
Yep. So
that's around about the 12th of July. Yeah? So then about 2 days after they leave, so it's maybe the 13th or 14th of July.
Mm-hmm.
I took so many notes on this now, and now I'm trying to do it out of my brain. About the 13th or 14th of July, then, these blue orbs appear again in the field, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like maybe 3 of them, and they're doing the same thing where they're like spinning around and making patterns and disappearing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then they stop, and they just float there. And they start to kind of wax between a bluey colour and a kind of white glow, you know?
Yeah.
Buck phones Roger straight away, right?
Okay.
And he's like, the lights are back. The lights are back in the field. This isn't like the last time, you know, where we used to see them for 30 seconds and they disappear. I've been looking at this for 5 minutes. I've actually got film on my Nokia 1880, which is a type of thing.
Good phone.
Yeah, he's got film on it. So Roger drives straight over, you know, and he arrives. It's about 10 p.m. and they look at the video and they look at the video again, and Roger's like, "This is crazy. I actually think that the lights are attached to something because they always seem to be, as they're spinning around or just standing there, they always seem to be the same distance, you know." Is it possible that they're the lights on a mechanical thing? You know, like is it possible they're the lights on the top of like a truck or something? Is that possible, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drive out to the field and I'll point my truck back at you, and then you film me on the camera and we'll see if that's what it could be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So he drives out to the field, and like I said, it's about maybe a quarter of a mile or a third of a mile away. He drives out to the field to where he thinks the lights is, and he turns his truck around, you know?
Yeah.
and he has the lights shining straight back at the house, and Buck is back there and he films it, and then after about 20 minutes he takes a lot of film of it, you know, of, like, you know, in those cameras I think you can only take clips for like 30 seconds or something. I don't think you could do big long videos in those,
Right.
but anyway, all of the videos that they mention are about 30 seconds long, like. So Roger comes back and he's like, did you get the film? And he goes, yeah, I filmed a couple of different clips. Okay, let's check them out. So they start looking at the clips, you know, and as they're looking at the clips, they notice that there are 2 red orbs that are spinning around above where Roger's car is, and they never saw them when they were filming it. Roger didn't notice when he was sitting in the car.
Yeah.
Oh wow, this is weird. They look at the next clip, same thing. And the thing that they notice is that the light from Roger's car is projecting, so it's shining directly at the camera and almost blinding the camera, whereas the light from these orbs is not. It's almost self-contained. It's like a dull glow out of them, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like they're not illuminating anything, they're illuminating themselves, they're self-illuminating, you know?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And then on the 3rd clip, they notice this really weird thing. What was that? Did something walk in front of the headlights? That's really weird. And they pull it back again, and it looks like, yeah, it is. It's a pair of really thin legs that just seem to walk through the light. Pull that back again, Buck. I will, Roger. And they're looking at it again, and oh my God, is that a really thin body with quite a large oval-shaped head on top? But they can't really make it out, and they wouldn't testify to it in court. But something bipedal was caught in the headlights of that car that night, Rachel.
Wow.
So they phone up the boys from SAP, and they're like, guys, it's happening again. You got to get down here. Yeah. So this time, OSAP, not messing around, send down 3 of their hottest scientists. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the 3 scientists rock up, and they've got, like, you know, he goes into it. They've got all the night vision goggles as well, but they've got 2 of these Sony DCLR 127 690 top of the range cameras. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they set up these cameras, and they're on watch all night for about 3 nights. Yeah.
Yeah.
They take more statements from the family. You know? Yeah, we've seen the occasional, you know, like basically at this stage, if the orbs if they hang around for 5 minutes, we make a note. If they don't, we're like, oh, more blue orbs, whatever, you know? The orbs show up a few times while they're there, yeah?
Okay.
And every time, Rachel, even though they turned those cameras on and pointed them, shooting film the whole time, when they go to check after the orbs, they've been turned off. Nobody was further than 30 feet from them the whole time. You just cannot photograph these things.
They won't let you.
They just won't let you. So they're watching all of this, yeah? And then one night, just the night before, they're there for about 3 days again, and they don't really see anything. They see a few things, but they can't, you know, like the orbs show up and then they're gone within a few seconds, and they can't get photos of them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they, on the last night, they're there, and they've got the night vision goggles on, and the orbs show up again, but in greater numbers, like in 6 or 7 of them, you know? And they're whizzing around the field where they always whiz around. And they're like, by jingo, get the camera on it. But when they point the camera on it, it's not actually visible in light, like it just seems to be infrared or something, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's the same as before. They can see it through the thingy, but they can't see it thing.
They can see it through the viewfinder, but not...
Yeah, through the viewfinder in infrared, but they can't see it, or in night vision, but they can't see it in, like, it's not illuminated.
Not in film.
Yeah, and they're shining lights, and they can't catch any of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the lights, they can see the lights on the night vision, but it's passing over it and all this. And then from the other side of the house comes this roar, you know? Because, of course, the orchard and the pasture and everything is out the back of the house. And they run around the front of the house, and Buck is there, and he's like, there was this giant black triangle floating above my greenhouse at the end of the yard, you know? And it was about 30 feet across. It was absolutely silent. It was just sitting there, no lights. and I just saw it, and I thought there was something there, and I shined a flashlight at it, and there it was, this huge monolithic black triangle, you know. So the guys are looking through the night vision and looking, and they can't see it, and they're like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "What do you mean? Am I sure? I know what I saw," kind of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So they start looking all around the place, and then they go around the side of the house to the pasture, and one of them is checking out the field, and there it is, where those blue orbs always show up in the middle of that field, is this black monolithic triangle about 30 feet across, no lights, no nothing, no windows, nothing, just hovering silently about 20 feet off the ground.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then they go get a camera, and it's gone.
Of course.
There's another story then, like where I thought this was quite funny as well. Between the first and second, like for the 5 or 6 days, you know, that between the OSAP former law enforcement guys and the OSAP scientists, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they said like it was 5 days, and they were like, oh, they were really hard 5 days for Buck, like, you know, he rarely got out of his pajamas, he'd stop shaving, he'd taken up smoking again. And I was like, this literally is me working from home. When I read it, I was like... Anyway.
Have you seen... I mean, you have been sitting up in bed lately.
But it was about 3 a.m, he suddenly wakes up and he finds himself at the window, you know, of the bedroom without any real notion of why he's standing there looking out the window. And then he sees the lights out in the field, you know?
Yeah.
And that's when he contacts the OSAP guys again, and he's like, yeah, this is serious, like, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm at my wit's end here, you know?
Okay.
Now, if I remember correctly, in the first book, this was different in that there was a spooky face at the window. He woke up and he was compelled to go to the window, and when he went to the window, he could have sworn there was a spooky face there. And they never had the detail about the legs in the headlights last time or something, but anyway, that's the goings on at Ventura County.
Wow.
Yeah. And the next chapter then, which is the last one that we'll talk about today.
Yes.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Is called The Blue Orbs Are Not Benign.
Or not benign.
They're not benign.
You heard it here, folks.
And it opens up with this, which I thought was interesting. A ball of light appeared in their home shortly after the flying saucer sighting. It first appeared in the older sister's bedroom, and then it went down the hall and appeared in my mother and dad's bedroom. And that is Kim Arnold, who is the daughter of Kenneth Arnold, who is the amateur pilot that started the flying saucer craze in 1974 or 1947. Do you remember he was flying past Mount Rainier in Washington State, I think?
Okay.
He was flying from Idaho to Washington State. I think it's Washington State. And he saw these like kind of boomerang shaped things skipping along out the window of his plane. And he said that they looked like flying saucers or stones skipping on the water. And he's the guy that coined the phrase flying saucers. So they've got a quote from his daughter just saying that when his dad had this experience and went home and everything, that these blue orbs showed up in his house as well. They're going hard trying to connect the blue orbs to everything.
Right.
You know? Right. And blue orbs are huge in the history of UFOs and all that, you know? I think we might have even discussed that before. So anyway, this is the story, not his real name, of a guy called... See, I had all these notes. I can't believe I actually spent ages writing the notes as well.
You're fine.
Yeah, they call him Ron Becker.
Ron Becker.
Ron Becker. And Ron Becker and his daughter. And Ron is I think he's some kind of academic or something, you know, like I think he might be studying microbiology or something like that, yeah? Mm-hmm. And Ron Becker is driving in Oregon. He's driving in Oregon, and he's going to a conference, and his brother lives close by to where the conference is.
Okay.
So they're going to visit his brother, and he's in a rental car, and they're driving through Oregon. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's driving on the interstate, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going about 85 miles an hour. You know.
Yeah.
So he's going at a nice old clip, like, and they're driving down the road. And this is in like 2005. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brum brum brum. They're speeding down, and his daughter, I guess she's young enough, maybe, you know. But she's kind of there in the passenger seat, and she's chilling out, and it's nighttime. And she looks over in the field, and in a field off the road, she sees these 3 blue orbs,
Mm-hmm.
and they seem to be kind of dancing around, yeah?
Yeah.
And they go vroom, straight down the highway, yeah? And the blue orbs peel out of the field, and they start following along behind the car, dancing along behind it, you know? And then suddenly they speed up, and 2 of them pass straight through the car.
Ooh.
And one of them goes right through his I gotta put myself in an American car now. Let's see. Goes right through his left shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah.
And through his chest, and passes out just halfway between his kind of shoulder and elbow on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even notice. Another one goes straight through the dashboard in front of him, and he notices the kind of flickering where it's above the line of the dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
And it flies out, and he said he felt a kind of warmness and a weird feeling in his chest, and then he kind of looked over, and he could see these 2 orbs that were spinning around each other just about 100 feet away from his car, just taking off into the darkness, you know. The daughter was freaked out by it. They get up to the house, to his brother's house, and his brother is like, "Are you all right, man? You look a bit shook." And he's like, "I think it's the driving, and I just had this weird thing." And the daughter starts going on about these blue orbs and stuff, and he's like going, "Yeah." He goes like, "I saw them as well. Like, it was really freaky, you know." He goes, I feel really tired and kind of nauseous and weird, you know."
Yeah.
So he's like, "Okay." So they get him like a nice hot cup of tea, and off to bed he goes, you know.
Yeah.
And he wakes up in the morning and he feels refreshed, and he goes off to the conference to meet his colleagues, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a 3-day conference in like microbiology or whatever, and he's going to the talks and he's learning about the latest research in microbiology, you know, and all this kind of racket.
Mm-hmm.
And talking to his colleagues about what he's researching. What are you researching? I'm looking into this, you know, conference stuff, like.
Yeah.
And he's having a good time, except every once in a while he starts to feel really kind of nauseous and lightheaded, you know. And at the end of the conference, he feels like when the adrenaline of like talking about something you really love is over, he just feels absolutely wiped out, you know.
Right.
And that's the story until over the next couple of weeks, on the left side of his face, where the orb entered through his kind of shoulder neck area,
Yeah.
he loses his eyebrow, and the hair on the left side of his head starts to fall out.
Whoa.
Yeah. And
Like a Two-Face situation.
yeah, like and he, you know, he still has this lethargy, and he's still feeling nauseous and stuff like that. And then he starts going to his doctor, just saying, "Look, the hair is falling out. I feel really tired. I don't feel myself." And they keep doing bloods on him, and they're doing all sorts, and they're like, they can't figure it out, you know. And this happens over the course of about like 3 years, you know.
3 years.
Yeah, and it gets really bad. He has to take time off work. He has to go on sabbatical or whatever for a while, you know.
Yeah.
Because he just can't do it. He's exhausted. He's not thinking straight. He just keeps getting tireder and tireder, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then after about 3 years, he just keeps going in and insisting on getting different tests run and stuff like that. And then one day they do a test and they get the markers, and he's actually got a cancerous growth. You know.
Yeah.
So they do. They bring him in and they do a biopsy, like, and it hasn't metastasized or whatever, but it's actually in the area of his chest where this blue orb flew out, you know.
Yeah.
And they talk about a lot of stuff. He has it removed anyway, and he starts to feel much better almost immediately, you know?
Okay.
And the doctors are saying that, you know, certainly for when you would start feeling bad and when it would get to a stage where they would be able to detect and operate, that the time frames seem right, but there's no way that they can make any inference that there's a cause and effect situation between the orb and his medical outcomes.
Well, they wouldn't be able to say that anyway.
They wouldn't be. They wouldn't. Yeah, like they wouldn't
They
say
wouldn't.
that anyway. Like, they. Yeah, and I mean, it sounds a bit dodgy, but he truly believed it anyway in the end, because he ends up. I think his physician is one of the guys that's hired by SAP, because he's got a. I googled this guy's name as well, like, and he's a genuine, like, oncologist, you know.
Yeah.
But he anyway, he's not saying anything like that, but he's saying it's definitely a weird case, and if you're talking about weird cases, let me tell you this one. Do you know that kind of way? And then that's basically it. They go into some detail recounting stuff that's previously happened on Skinwalker. Do you remember some of those things?
Hold on. In the chapter, is it?
Yeah, do you remember in the original book some of the stuff that happened with the blue orbs? Do you remember that?
Not really.
Do you remember when the blue orbs,
We have a recap.
when the cattle escaped from the field and they went out to try and get them back, and every time they got them back to the fence line where they were going to put them through the hole in the fence, the blue orbs would show up and chase the cattle back out again.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that? And they were at it for hours and hours, and the cattle were in a field of alfalfa, and it was really dangerous for cattle because the alfalfa would give them like literal killer gas.
Yeah.
Or do you remember the bit where they're on the porch of the house with the two dogs or 3 dogs? Do you remember this bit? And the orbs come out of the cottonwood trees at the end of the yard, and they start floating around, and the dogs start barking, and then they start like bothering the dogs, and the dogs run after the orbs, and they run into the cottonwood trees, and the dogs are like yap 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 yap, pshoo!
Yes, I remember.
And then there's absolute silence,
Yes.
and your man is like sitting there going, whoa, and he starts calling for the dogs, and they're not coming, but it's like pitch black, and he's like, there's no way I'm going in there. And then he goes in there the next day, and there's like greasy smoldering piles of something.
Dog.
Yeah, there's greasy smoldering piles of dog in there. So I guess what they're trying to draw connections between the orbs and all of this. So what do you make of that?
I want whatever they're smoking.
Do you know, like, I don't think this is as good as the first book. Like, it's really just a rehashing of all these stories they've already told, you know? I don't even know if they're adding that much detail to it. There's just an awful lot of name dropping as well in it, you know? And I mean, I'm going to continue on with it, like. But, like, just to give you an idea, the next chapter talks about, you know, how, and it's got a quote from Travis Taylor, who's the head scientist at The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which is the new TV series, you know, about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to talk about, because it's called the infectious agent model. So it's going to talk about why do all these people with weird experiences keep having weird experiences when they go home, you know? About the most interesting thing about that to me is the quote from Kenneth Arnold's daughter saying that, attesting that happened at their house. You know?
So people that are going through that will say that they've become attuned to the extraterrestrial or something, or that they've been tagged, or that they're special.
That's definitely what's going on here. That's what they're saying. Yeah.
I'm gonna turn on the light so everyone can see what it looks like in the actual light.
But I wish they'd say that directly. You know, they keep talking about the psychic, but all they're doing is recounting stuff they've recounted in the last book, which was a more entertaining book, you know.
Mm.
And like where they started to lose me in the other book was when they left Skinwalker Ranch and they were like, "Let me tell you about this other weird ranch in California," you know.
Yeah.
It was like you're running out of steam already, you know, and I just feel like they're running out of steam already, you know.
Well, honestly, yeah. I agree. I think that they're just cashing it in, really.
Oh, there's 100% this is a cash in, yeah.
All right. What do you think?
I think it's like it's really nice. I really like that jellyfish kind of thing, isn't it? It's jellyfish, isn't it?
It's jellyfish, so like I guess the interpretation is up to the person, but I like to think that it's, you know, either her spirit or maybe some bad energy. The blue orb. She's been touched by the blue orb. What?
Bit of decorum, Rachel.
Listen. Well, thank you for doing all this research. How much more of the book do we have to go?
Honestly, I think that could be it, man.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll let the people decide.
Yeah, definitely, but...
Let us know in a comment if you would like to see another one. But to be honest with you, it feels like this one is more about the... like how they got the funding and who they schmoozed and...
Yeah, and I mean, you don't want to hear about these crazy UFO. You don't have the kind of like where you're reading it and he drops a name and you go, oh... Right. You know, you don't have that, like,
that doesn't really happen,
and it's hard to get that across, like, and again, I think, like, for the most part, this is thin soup, man. You know what I mean? Like it's grandma's never-ending soup. Like, they've taken the same ingredients from the last book,
stone soup,
and they've added some other ingredients that they've managed to come across, and they boiled it all up again, and now they're trying to sell it to you, you know. And it's just the fact that it doesn't seem to be structured. I mean, like, I already know about this ranch in California, and frankly, the last one was more interesting. Like, the stories that he claimed happened, like when Buck was out in the yard, and suddenly out of nowhere, this big spotlight opened above him and shone down, and he couldn't see what was above it, and he was, do you know what I mean?
Right.
That's a great, like, that's straight out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind or something, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But this, I don't know, it's thin soup. I'm disappointed with this book, to be honest, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean
I'll mine it and I'll find some other interesting stuff in here, like, but to be honest, I mean, some of these chapters, like meeting with Department of Homeland Security.
Okay.
You don't want to hear about that. That's separate to meeting with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations.
Wow. I wonder how that went.
Anyway, yeah, I'm disappointed. Maybe we'll look into some cryptid or something.
Yeah, we can always move on. It is almost October, so we should be getting into the creepy again.
Yeah, we could do some creepy stuff. Yeah.
And yeah, we could talk a little bit about modern folklore as well, regarding cryptids and fae.
That would actually be interesting. Like again, I thought that what they were going to do here was say that everything is everything. All of these things, the cryptids, because you remember we were talking about this before, that you often see reports of Bigfoot with these blue orbs as well. And I thought that they were going to try and tie all of these together and make everything, you know? Yeah. Which is what I wanted, but that's not what they're doing. Like, they're like going, then we got funding, and then we wrote this thing and talked to a guy in California, and then we went to Virginia, and there was like all this spooky stuff happening. And do you know what I mean? It's like... Yeah. Anyway. They're not drawing any conclusions either, is what I'm trying to say.
They're not really saying anything.
No, they're just kind of telling you, like, and then this freaky thing happened. Anyway, sorry. That's enough of that.
So, thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of Theory Tuesday, the last episode of Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. And yeah, next time that we see you in on the first week of October, I will hopefully have this painting done, actually, and then you can see the whole thing. But until then, I hope that you all stay safe and enjoy your crafting, and we will see you next time on Theory Tuesday. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.